All right, so we have our final talk of the morning session. This is a talk that's going to be on human activity recognition using psychological data from wearables. So take it away whenever you guys are ready.
Sure thing. So, hi everyone. My name's Noah Lanier.
I'm Kush Galati.
I'm Annie Hirsch.
I'm Nathan Warren.
And thank you so much for coming to our presentation on human activity recognition using physiological, looks a lot like psychological, but physiological data from wearables. So that's a lot of jargon, so let's decode this into something we can all understand. So first, human activity recognition. Well, we're all familiar with things like Fitbits and Apple Watches. These things are wearables, usually things on your wrist. And each of these have particular sensors in them. And these sensors, such as an accelerometer, can track motion, or something like a heart rate sensor can track your heart rate. And what human activity recognition does is use the data from these sensors to predict what activity you're doing. And so, for instance, let's say you're wearing an Apple Watch right now. You can take the data from that, and well, you're probably sitting. So I would predict that you're sitting. And if you are, I'd be correct in the human activity recognition. And so typically, so human activity recognition is a big field, and typically only the accelerometer data, or generally mechanical sensor data, is used to perform this human activity recognition. And it does pretty well. But we want to see if when you include things like heart rate or skin temperature or how much you're sweating, which is electrodermal activity, if that improves how well you can do human activity recognition. And so that was our objective, to see if having this extra sensor data helps anything. Our second objective was, as we're making the code and making the models to try to solve this problem, we want to make that open source, part of a larger pipeline called the Digital Biomarker Discovery Pipeline that's made by a lab at Duke called the Big Ideas Lab. And so that if somebody has sensor data that has physiological things, they can use our code to figure out for themselves and experiment around.
So let's get right into the methods. Our data comes from another study entitled Investigating Sources of Inaccuracy in Wearable Optical Heart Rate Sensors, which was previously conducted by our project manager and concluded in showing that common wearables showed no significant difference in accuracy between skin tones. This data set, which is called the STEP data set, has a total of 56 participants performing 4 different activities. The labels for these activities are baseline, which is a seated rest, which lasted 4 minutes, deep breathing, which lasted 1 minute, activity, which was walking, which lasted 5 minutes, and typing, which lasted for 1 minute. All activities were performed twice per participant, so we had a total of 22 minutes of data per participant. With this data set, we isolated data points from ranges of time, which were labeled, and we resampled all the data at 4 Hertz. We built random forest and basic neural networks, which took 2 types of inputs. The first, using raw sensor data, classified individual time points. The second type of input we used were summary statistics from windows of time. These windows lasted 20 seconds and included a 10-second overlap. So these summary statistics from these windows served as temporal features for our data and allowed our random forest and neural net to achieve a higher accuracy. To validate these models, we ran leave one person out validation and tested on data previously unseen by the model. To check the generalizability of our model architecture, we also trained and tested on an open source dataset called PMAP2, where we were also able to achieve a high accuracy.
So let's take a look at our results. We can see that feature engineering is definitely helpful in our models, corresponding with an increase in accuracy, as you can see in figure 2. Both our ANN and random forest models exhibit a higher accuracy with the engineered features, which is promising. If we move to the next figure, it is apparent that there is an inconclusive information gain between the accelerometer only trial and using both accelerometer and physiological data. So you can take a look at the blue and red bars across our 3 models in figure 3 to see this. And the error bars on our graph represent the standard deviation when performing leave one out cross validation on the 56 subjects in our data. And we're going to discuss this analysis further in our conclusions.
So let's take a look at figure 4. So that's the confusion matrix for our best performing deep learning model, which is the artificial neural network that has engineered window features. So taking a look at activity, which is the top left corner, it performs the best, which makes sense because activity is much different compared to baseline, sitting up, deep breathing, and typing. So the model was able to pick up on those differences better. But where our model is struggling is on baseline, which is the second row. So as you can see, the model is actually mispredicting this activity and even distribution, which is really interesting because there are kind of elements of baseline in all the activities. So this kind of lets us know that our model has not really picked up any new information from the physiological data and is still struggling in picking up the physiological differences that may be present in deep breathing and typing compared to baseline and activity. So let's move on to the conclusions then. So as Kush mentioned, and you can reference this in figure 3 as well, there were really minimal differences between all of our models in just using the accelerometry data and then using the accelerometry and physiological data. So, but this is not really a conclusion across all human activity recognition problems. This is really maybe unique to our data or just unique to the models that we built. So to fix this, I think our team would like to do some more comprehensive feature engineering so that the model can pick up on more complex differences in the physiology or mechanics of the activities that we have represented in our study. And then finally, we know this is actually a promising path to possibly go forward and do more comprehensive feature engineering because in both our deep learning and our machine learning models, there was an improvement in accuracy in our deep learning model once we did the feature engineering on the windows. And finally, we developed an open source platform so that anyone who has human activity recognition data can do like an end-to-end analysis on it and build their own deep learning models.
Great, thanks so much, Anne. And so at the completion of this project, if somebody wanted to work upon it, their work is really cut out for them. And so immediate next step would to be look into the physiological data and try to extract more advanced features that would better represent this data. And so maybe the reason we're not seeing an increase in things like model metrics when we include physiological data is because the features that we were using don't capture what makes physiological data so helpful. And so by working to extract more advanced features, we might see an increase. Another thing a future team could do is create an ensemble model. And so imagine the example I gave earlier with I take your data, I put it into a model and it tries to predict. Well, how about I take your data, I put it into 5 models, and then I choose the most prevalent classification out of all of them. And so that might just, in general, increase accuracy if that's a goal of a future project. And then, if possible, to have more data to work with. Whenever you ask a data scientist, including me, an experimenter would ask, well, how much data do you want to work with? The answer is infinite data. Give me all of the data. You want as much as you can. And so more data is always nice, and but it's very, very difficult to get. The experiments take a long time and a lot of organization to do. And so if someone wanted to investigate this like even more rigorously, more data could be obtained. Okay. And so if you like to look at the open source repository we have, you can go up to this QR code, the GitHub. So you scan it, it'll take you to our GitHub, and it'll take you to all the things you can do. And so it's part of a bigger thing called the Digital Biomarker Discovery Pipeline. And the way our part fits into that is that we're now able to, if you have raw Empatica E4 data, and so Empatica E4 is the name of the sensor we use. It wasn't an Apple Watch, it wasn't a Fitbit. It was this really advanced thing, cost $1,700. But if researchers have Empatica E4 data, they can go from that raw data to having an end model. And so it's an end-to-end machine learning now that it's part of this bigger pipeline. Okay. And so last, we just want to acknowledge everyone that helped us do this, because we needed a lot of help. The first thing, Dr. Jesselyn Dunn, who leads the Big Ideas Lab that created the Digital Biomarker Discovery Pipeline. Without her, we wouldn't be having context to work on the problem. Brene Bent for all her mentorship and dealing with our constant confusion. And the rest of the members of the Duke Big Ideas Lab for providing feedback on how we can make our project better. And also thanks to Data Plus and the Roads Information Initiative for providing the organization so projects like these could happen in the first place. And so with that, we're welcome to take any questions. Either feel free to just speak up or write something in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them. So, and thank you so much for listening.
Thanks a lot. That was great. I just emailed your GitLab link to myself, and I'm going to post it in the chat.
Cool.
Just in case the QR is a little bit, somebody doesn't have a QR reader or something. Are there any questions in the chat? Do people want to chime in and ask anything? So one thing I'll ask is could you just go into what the data is a little bit more? So these accelerometers, where are they on somebody's body, and does it matter where they are on somebody's body? Does it matter if I'm like holding a phone, or that it has to be attached to my chest? And what is the physiological data? Is it heart rate, body temperature? Like what goes into that type of stuff?
So the Empatica E4 wearable that we were referencing is on someone's wrist. To answer your question about whether the placement matters, it does matter. I think that the wrist placement matters in terms of how good the heart rate sensor is. It may not be able to pick up differences in like if you're moving your legs or not. It's more based on the arm. So there are some, I guess, errors in that way. So we have a 3-axis accelerometer that can go on all 3 axes and sensor movement there. There's a PPG sensor, which senses both your heart rate and your blood volume pulse. There is a electrodermal activity sensor, which is kind of loosely related to sweat, but it tracks an emotional response, which is interesting, like a polygraph test. Like if you lie, that is kind of the measurement there. We also have skin temperature. If there's anything I'm missing, please speak up, team. But I think that was it. Did that answer your question?
There are 2 more.
Yeah.
We also have blood volume pulse, which is, I believe that's related to the PPG sensor, but Anna, you can correct me if I'm wrong. And we also made a magnitude feature. So the 3-axis accelerometer tracks movement in 3 directions, right? And the magnitude is taking, sorry, I feel like I'm about to sneeze, and so I'm trying to not. The magnitude just takes the magnitude of those 3 components and puts them into 1 feature. And so that was the data.
Cool.
There might be some questions in the chat.
Yeah, so Donald Pepka asks, can you explain the random forest model a bit and how you used it with your data?
Sure. So our random forest model was essentially a compilation of ensemble learning and decision trees, where we were able to see like on each branch what type of information gain and feature importance we're getting from both our accelerometry and physiological sensors. So we did a lot of experimentation with deep learning models at the at the beginning of our project. And we wanted to also try traditional machine learning approaches to see if they were able to capture the information gain in our sensors, especially with feeding in feature engineered windows. And as you can see from our results, the random forest and ANNs are actually very comparable in terms of accuracy when giving the feature engineered windows. So I think that we did a lot of work with deep learning, but in terms of interpretability and being able to evaluate our feature importances, the random forest is an especially good model for that.
Donald, did that answer your question about the random forest model? And you're welcome to follow up with anything as well.
Also, I think the feature importance is something we didn't include here, but the feature importance in our random forest is really helpful. And Kush, I don't know if I'm remembering right, but the most used features were all accelerometry, right?
Yep, that would be correct.
Mm-hmm.
But there were still
yeah.
The physiological sensors. So when you do random forest, it tells you how important each feature was for creating the decision tree, or the decision trees, and classifying based off of them. And so while the accelerometry was the most contributing, the physiological data, it wasn't zero. Like, there was still some information there. And this is true for I believe this is true for both the individual time points and the features we engineered, which were the summary statistics. And so we're thinking the idea of creating more advanced features is to increase the contribution. And so if we were to run the random forest again using the more advanced features, we would expect the feature importance to not only include at the top accelerometry, but also some of the advanced physiological features.
So Evan asks, did you consider using any different coordinate projections for accelerometry data? For example, spherical rather than the three. I mean, I think you said three. I think the assumption is that you're using Cartesian coordinates, but you know.
Yeah, I don't think we at least I don't think I came across that in the literature. I might be forgetting it though, but that's certainly a good idea. I'll say in a future direction, like if we were to continue working on this project, that's a great suggestion that we didn't try out.
It seems like one of the, I mean, so I'm extrapolating a little bit, and Evan, please feel free to chime in if you want. But I think one of the things that naturally comes to mind is you could think about, like, you know, if this is the origin, if my shoulder is the origin, and I'm going to rotate around my shoulder, which is the origin, maybe I could see whether my arm's in kind of a swaying motion more easily in a new coordinate system or not. But then, of course, if I'm walking forward, then that origin is constantly changing. So there has to be some type of decomposition of, what type of transformation or decomposition you want to make, and what kind of, like, how you know, trying to reconstruct the position of the arm or the trajectory of the arm versus where the body is could be something you could probably do with the accelerometry data. But that would be a very different type of problem as well.
Yeah.
Dr. Dunn says, if we were using more traditional IMUs, we could include a gyroscope. This is more common to address that issue.
Oh, yes, yes.
Oh, and yeah, thanks. IMU is internal inertial measurement unit. I guess one of the other things that I was wondering about is, you know, you're talking about using the accelerometers in conjunction with physiological data as a predictor of you know, emotion. But I'm also wondering, let's suppose that you could use the accelerometer to predict the type of activity, and then you could say, okay, well, given that this person is walking and this is what their physiological indicators are showing, here's their heart rate, for example. I want, like, is there a way to indicate health out of this, right? I mean, and this would be kind of like a follow-on project, but, you know, given that I'm walking at this rate, And given given what my resting heart rate is versus given what my heart rate is when I'm walking at this rate, I may be like a huge outlier. Maybe my heart rate is like exploding when I just do a little bit of activity or something like this. Are there any thoughts of using the data not just as a predictor, but as sort of a conjunction for sort of health indicators and things like this?
Yeah, definitely, because so what we've built is kind of like a baseline for people to jump off from, and then they can explore these additional ideas. Like that kind of idea is actually employed in, you know, a variety of different ways. Like people with neurodegenerative progressive diseases who have like ataxia that develops throughout life. Maybe you can use this kind of model to detect walking abnormalities earlier in life to help patients get treated earlier in life, leading to better outcomes. So this is a jumping off point from there, and there's so much more that can be done in a number of different health-related fields.
Also, this is what the DBDP has, like multiple variations of this sort of thing. So if you guys are interested, go to the QR code, but also go to the Big Ideas Lab GitHub, which is where everything in the digital biomarker discovery pipeline is.
Cool. And then I have one last question too about the accuracy you have. So you're trying to model whether this person's sitting. I guess so I guess the first question is, or what are the states? And my assumption is something that's like it's sitting, standing, walking, running. The accuracy you have is, I assume that certain things are more accurate than other things. So like where that this 20% hit that you're taking, is that trying to distinguish walking from running? Is it trying to distinguish sitting down from laying down? I assume it's not distinguishing sitting down from walking, but maybe it is. So I'm just wondering, when the model fails, how does it fail?
Most of it is predicting the deep breathing and typing from baseline, as you can see in the confusion matrix. Part of this was because originally in the experimental design, activity and baseline were actually performed for 4 or 5 minutes, and then deep breathing and typing were performed for 1 minute. So we had to do some, I think, undersampling or some sort of balancing to make sure that those leveled out. And that kind of lack of data, and not because of the lack of data and because those activities themselves are so similar, baseline, like sitting and deep breathing, are like essentially almost the same thing, and typing you're in the same like mechanical position as you are in those two, are pretty much the same. So our model did fail in picking up those differences in those 3 activities, since they are so similar to each other compared to just walking and standing up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And as Dr. Dunn kind of mentions in the comments, this is one of the challenges of data reuse. And so as a reminder, our data set doesn't come from a human activity recognition experiment. It comes from trying to figure out if the sensor accuracy changes based off of skin tone. That's not human activity recognition. And so maybe one of the reasons why we're not seeing as good of data as you would see in, like, when you look at the PayMap2 data set, accuracy in F1, 96, right? That was a HAR experiment, I believe. And so maybe one of the reasons why our accuracy metrics are lower is because it wasn't from an HAR experiment.
Cool. Are there any other questions or things that people want to address in the chat, or just chime in? So then with that, let's thank the groups for a really nice presentation. There are 4 really great posters this morning. So we'll take a break for lunch now. We'll resume at 1:30, and yeah, thanks a lot. See you all in about an hour, or not if you're in a different room, but maybe see some of you in about an hour.
Thanks so much, everyone.